When Joan called and asked me if I would introduce her, I have to say we both laughed because it's the first time she's ever asked me to do anything that she didn't have to twist my arm. And it truly was an unexpected honor, but she's my friend, pure and simple, so it was easy to say yes. So I'd like to also take a real quick minute to recognize her family, because I know she brought all of them today, including Doug. And Doug Whiteman, I have to shout out to you for being such a good friend and coming to be with Doug. I mean, that's a really true friend. So I'm not actually going to read Joan's bio because you all have it in the book, and you can read it later. But I'd like to just tell you a little bit about Joan, the person. And she's exceedingly compassionate, exceptionally generous, and deeply cares about the League and the community. She's never short on ideas about how to make things better, how to ensure the future, and who to include in that future. And if you ask her for her advice and her opinion, she will answer with honesty and candor. And sometimes even when you don't ask, she'll give you her advice and her opinion. But whatever the moment, she's in it with her full attention and focus. And for those of you who really know her, let's face it, she's a lot of fun. And I have a recent testament to that with Wendy Borchert over there, I see you, and Leslie McDonald and Joan teaching me at least, how to play bunco. So enough said. But I want to also tell you a little story that a lot of you may not know about the League and its history. And somewhere in the late 70s, after she and Doug had moved to Los Angeles from Houston, she was having a conversation with Grace Salvatore. Now, many of you in this room may not remember or even know who Grace Salvatore was, but she was a philanthropist here in Los Angeles, and she was very instrumental in raising a lot of money for things like the Music Center, USC, Children's Hospital, which we remember was one of our own projects, Good Samaritan, St. John's, and others. But what you don't know is that Grace and her husband Henry were Doug's godparents. So imagine that Joan is having a conversation with Mrs. Salvatore, lamenting the fact that the Junior League didn't have a nice home like many of the other leagues around the United States. Although what she didn't realize at the time is that we were only paying $1 a year at farmers market, so, you know. But anyway, I kind of like to imagine the conversation as Joan having one of her visionary moments and talking it out with someone. So fast forward not too long, and a restricted donation is made to the Junior League in the amount of $125,000 for a building. Well, it turns out it was Mrs. Salvatore, and she did it without even telling Joan or Doug that she had done it. So I did some calculations. Well, actually, I didn't do them. The internet did, you know, where you can tell me what the inflation rate would be today. So in those days, $125,000 would have been, in our terms, $443,648.39, which is a rather substantial donation made to an organization in which Mrs. Salvatore didn't even belong, but she did it because she wanted to support something that was important to Joan. So I think that tells you a lot right there about the respect and love people have for Joan. And we all know the ending to that particular story is that in the late 1980s, a property on Larchmont became available. By then, that building fund had grown enough from that seed money and from member contributions that the board was able to consider the purchase. And P.J. Clark was the president at that point of time, and she tells me that since the fund had been named in Mrs. Salvatore's honor, the board felt they needed to call her and find out if she would approve of using the money in that regard to buy the property. So the call was made, and Mrs. Salvatore said, fine. And then in 1993, with the additional bequest from Mrs. Rainey, we were able to build on Larchmont. So the next time you go to Rainey House, I want you to remember that we are there in large part due to the strength of someone's vision, who mused about it with a friend, and then the friend acted quietly and substantially. Joan would also humbly say, and be the first to say that we all stand on the shoulders of those who go before us. Well, Joan has gone before, and there is no doubt that her shoulders have supported a lot of us who have come after. It is absolutely right that we are recognizing her today as a Spirit of Voluntarism Award recipient. Joan.